The moment Thelma Gardner stepped into Golden Dragon Karate Academy, leaning on her cane, the laughter began. Students exchanged knowing glances as the elderly black woman fumbled with her oversized gi, struggling to tie the white belt around her waist. Sensei Rick watched with barely concealed impatience while Tyler and Josh, the dojo's alpha males, staged a cruel imitation of her movements. None of them bothered to look closely at her eyes, calm, observant, missing nothing. None thought to question why her mistakes were so precisely inconsistent. They saw only what they expected, a confused old woman out of her depth, not the legendary Thunderhand who once dominated Japan's most elite tournaments. Their mockery would continue for weeks, each snicker and side-eye unknowingly pulling at threads that, when finally unraveled, would expose the formidable master hiding in plain sight. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the strip mall parking lot as Thelma Gardner stepped carefully from her weathered Buick. At 72, she moved with the deliberate precision of someone who had learned to respect her body's limitations. A floral cardigan draped over her shoulders, and a wooden cane supported her right side. Despite the slight tremor in her hands, her eyes remained sharp, taking in every detail of the storefront before her. Golden Dragon Karate Academy read the red and gold sign, complete with a dragon silhouette frozen mid-strike. Thelma adjusted her glasses and straightened her back before pushing open the glass door. The reception area smelled of sweat and disinfectant. A young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from boredom to confusion as she took in Thelma's appearance. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone suggesting she doubted she could. Thelma offered a warm smile. "Yes, dear. I was hoping to observe a class today. I've been thinking about taking up martial arts." The receptionist, her nameplate read Amanda, blinked twice before responding. "You want to take karate?" She glanced at Thelma's cane, then back to her face. "That's right." Thelma's voice was soft but firm. "Is that possible?" Amanda seemed to struggle with a response. Let me check with the manager. You can have a seat if you'd like." Thelma nodded and lowered herself onto a bench along the wall. Through the large viewing window, she could see a class in progress. About 15 students, mostly teenagers and young adults, moved in synchronized patterns across the polished wood floor. They shouted with each punch and kick, their white uniforms snapping with each movement. At the front stood a man in his 40s with a black belt wrapped around his waist. His salt and pepper hair was cropped close to his scalp, and his voice carried throughout the room as he barked commands. "Again, stronger, feel the power in your core." Sensei Rick Walker paced the front of the class, his eyes scanning each student critically. Thelma watched with quiet intensity, her hands folded over her cane. The class continued for another 20 minutes before Rick clapped his hands together. "Line, up, bow." The students formed neat rows, bowed in unison, then broke into casual conversation as they began collecting their belongings. Thelma rose slowly and made her way to the entrance of the training floor. Rick was wiping his brow with a small towel when he noticed her standing there. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I hope so," Thelma replied. "I'm interested in joining your beginner's class." Before Rick could respond, a stocky young man with closely cropped blonde hair snickered loudly behind her. "Ma'am, the bingo hall is that way." He pointed toward the far end of the strip mall, where a community center hosted various senior activities. Several other students laughed, including a tall, athletic young man who seemed to be the blonde boy's friend. Rick's smile faltered. "Tyler," he said, his tone carrying a half-hearted warning. Tyler shrugged, grabbing his gym bag. "Just trying to help her find the right place, Sensei." Rick turned back to Thelma, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, our program is pretty physically demanding. I'm not sure it would be appropriate for someone of your age." Thelma finished for him, her smile never wavering. "Well, yes," Rick admitted. We have insurance considerations, and the risk of injury. Rick. A sharp voice cut through the conversation. A woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled into a severe bun approached from the office. I'm Erica Matthews, business manager for Golden Dragon. She extended her hand to Thelma. Is there something we can help you with? Thelma shook her hand firmly. Thelma Gardner. I'm interested in joining your beginner's karate class. Erica's professional smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed her skepticism. Ms. Gardner, while we appreciate your interest, I think Rick is right to be concerned. Our program is designed for people with different physical capabilities. I understand your concern, Thelma said, but I'm not looking to compete in tournaments. I'm simply looking for some light fitness and discipline. I think karate could provide that for me. Erica glanced at Rick, then back to Thelma. Well, our policy is inclusivity, of course, she said, lowering her voice. But we have to consider liability issues. Perhaps Tai Chi would be more appropriate? The community center offers. I specifically want to learn karate, Thelma insisted. Gently. If it doesn't work out, I'll be the first to admit it. Rick and Erica exchanged looks. Thelma couldn't help but notice the silent communication between them. Erica's slight nod, Rick's reluctant sigh. We could use the enrollment, Erica whispered, just loud enough for Thelma to hear. And it would look good for our community outreach. Rick rubbed the back of his neck. Fine. We can start you with a trial period. The beginner class meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4. Uniform rental is included in your first month. Thank you, Thelma said, her smile genuine. I appreciate the opportunity. Amanda will get you set up with the paperwork, Erica said, already turning back toward her office. Rick, we need to discuss the weekend tournament. As Rick followed Erica, Thelma made her way back to the reception area. She could feel the stares of the lingering students, could hear their whispers. She kept her head high. 20 minutes later, with paperwork completed and payment processed, Amanda handed Thelma a folded white uniform. This is the smallest adult GI we have, she said. The locker room is through there if you want to try it. On. Thelma thanked her and made her way to the women's locker room. Inside, she found a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, changing out of her GI. The girl looked up, surprised to see Thelma. Hello? Thelma said warmly. I'm new. Here. Oh. Hi. The girl seemed unsure how to respond. I'm Mia. Thelma Gardner. Pleased to meet you. Mia nodded awkwardly and continued gathering her things. Thelma found a bench and carefully unfolded the white uniform. It was clearly several sizes too large, but it would have to do. She slipped it on over her clothes, struggling somewhat with the stiff fabric. The white belt proved particularly challenging as she tried to remember the proper way to tie it from watching the other students. When she emerged from the locker room, several students from the previous class were still lingering. Tyler and his tall friend were among them, and they made no effort to hide their amusement at Thelma's appearance. Check it out, Josh, Tyler said loudly. Grandma's ready for battle. Josh, the taller boy, laughed. The belt's not even right. It's upside down or something. Thelma approached Rick, who was setting up for the next class. Is this correct? She asked, gesturing to her belt. Rick glanced at her, then quickly adjusted the belt. There you go. Let's have you join today's class since you're already here. Just follow along as best you can. The beginner's class was smaller than the advanced one Thelma had observed earlier. Most of the students were teenagers or young adults, with a few in their 30s. Thelma was by far the oldest person in the room. Rick positioned her in the back row. Basic stances today, he announced to the class. We'll start with front stance. Thelma watched carefully as Rick demonstrated, then attempted to mimic his position. Her knees protested as she tried to bend into the stance and her balance wavered. She had to use her cane to stabilize herself several times. No canes on the training floor, Rick called out. If you need it, maybe this isn't the right activity for you. Thelma nodded, setting her cane against the wall. She wobbled back to her position, moving more slowly now. As the class progressed through various stances and basic punches, Thelma struggled visibly. Her movements were stiff and awkward, her timing consistently off. When they practiced simple blocks, she seemed to forget the sequences, dropping into wrong stances or moving in the opposite direction from everyone else. She could hear the snickers, could feel the side eyes from both students and instructor. But she persisted, her face a mask of concentration. After class, as students filtered out, Thelma approached Rick. Despite the humiliation she had endured, she bowed deeply to him, showing proper dojo etiquette. "Thank you, Sensei," she said. "I look forward to improving." Rick seemed taken aback by her formality and composure. "Right, well, see you Wednesday then." In the locker room, Thelma could hear Tyler and Josh in the adjacent men's room, their voices carrying through the thin wall. "Did you see her trying to do the horse stance?" Tyler's voice mocked. "Like a newborn giraffe." Josh's deeper voice followed with a high-pitched imitation. "Thank you, Sensei. Like she's in some old kung fu movie." Mia's voice cut in, quieter but clear. "Come on, guys. That's enough." "What, you're defending her now?" Tyler challenged. "She doesn't belong here, and you know it." "Whatever," Mia responded. "I've got to go." Thelma changed quietly, folding the GI neatly before returning it to Amanda at the front desk. She walked to her car with dignity, her cane tapping a steady rhythm on the asphalt. The drive home was silent, no radio, no distractions, just the steady hum of the engine and the weight of the day's events. Thelma's apartment was in a modest building on the quieter side of town. The one-bedroom unit was neat and sparsely decorated, with furniture that had seen better days but was well-maintained. Photos lined a small bookshelf. Thelma in her youth, a handsome man with his arm around her, the two of them in front of various landmarks around the world. She moved through the space with practiced familiarity, preparing a simple dinner and eating it at her small kitchen table. Afterward, she walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out a carved wooden box from the top shelf. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Thelma opened the box carefully. Inside lay a faded black belt, the fabric worn but the color still deep. Next to it was a weathered photograph, the colors muted with age. In it, a younger Thelma stood proudly among a group of men in martial arts uniforms, all bearing black belts. Behind them hung a Japanese flag. Thelma traced her fingers over the faces. In the photo, lingering on her own youthful image, her expression was solemn, her posture perfect, her eyes filled with a fire that still flickered, however faintly, in her aged face. She closed the box without a word, returned it to its place, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to remember who she once was, and perhaps who she might become again. 2 days later, Thelma returned to Golden Dragon Karate Academy for her second class. She arrived early, her GI neatly folded in a canvas bag, her face composed despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. The memory of the snickers and side eyes from her first class lingered, but so did her determination. Amanda barely looked, up as Thelma entered. "They're starting in 15 minutes, she said, gesturing toward the locker room. Thelma changed quickly, managing the belt with slightly more confidence this time. When she emerged onto the training floor, a few students were already warming up, including Mia, who offered a hesitant smile. "Hello again," Thelma said, approaching the young woman. "Mia, right?" Mia nodded. "Yes. How are you feeling after Monday's class?" "First sessions can be rough. A bit sore," Thelma admitted with a chuckle. "But nothing that won't heal." She noticed Mia struggling with her stance as she practiced a basic front kick. The girl's balance was off, her weight distributed incorrectly. "May I?" Thelma asked gently. Mia looked uncertain but nodded. "Try placing your foot here," Thelma suggested, pointing to a spot slightly to the left of where Mia had positioned herself. "And remember to breathe. The power comes from here." She lightly touched Mia's diaphragm. "Not from your legs." Mia adjusted her stance, took a deep breath, and executed the kick again. This time her balance held steady, and the kick had more force behind it. That's better," Mia said, surprised. "Thanks." Before Thelma could respond, Rick called, the class to order. They lined up, bowed, and began the session with basic punching drills. Thelma moved slowly but with more coordination than she had shown in the first class, though she still appeared to struggle with certain movements. Halfway through the class, Rick paired students for light contact sparring. Thelma found herself without a partner until Josh stepped forward, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll work with the new lady," he announced loudly. Rick looked uncertain. "Be careful, Josh. Light contact only." "Of course, Sensei." Josh's tone was innocent, but his eyes gleamed with mischief. Tyler, watching from nearby, gave Josh a thumbs up. The pairs spread out across the floor. Josh squared off against Thelma, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Thelma stood in a basic stance, her guard up, but her posture stiff and awkward. "Ready, Grandma?" Josh asked, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Thelma nodded. "Ready." Josh threw a light jab, clearly pulling his punch. Thelma attempted to step aside but moved too slowly. The punch grazed her shoulder. She tried to counter with a basic block and punch combination, but her timing was off, her movements clumsy. "Come on," Josh taunted. "Even my little sister hits harder than that." He threw another punch, this one a bit faster. Thelma shuffled awkwardly to the side, nearly losing her balance. Josh followed with a light kick that tapped her hip, causing her to stumble backward. Several students had stopped their own sparring to watch, including Tyler, who was openly laughing now. "Josh," Rick called from across the room, his tone carrying a warning. "Keep it appropriate." "Just teaching the basics, Sensei," Josh replied innocently. He continued to dance around Thelma, throwing controlled strikes that she either blocked poorly or failed to avoid entirely. Each time she stumbled or winced, Tyler and a few others would snicker. Mia watched with a frown, her own sparring partner forgotten. Rick finally approached and ended the session. "That's enough sparring for today," he announced. "Let's move on to Kata practice." As the class reformed into lines, Thelma caught her breath, her face flushed from exertion but her eyes calm. Josh returned to Tyler's side, both of them mimicking her movements and laughing. "Dude, did you see her face when you got her with that roundhouse?" Tyler whispered, a little too loudly. Mia shot them a disapproving look, but said nothing. After class, Thelma thanked Rick once again with a formal bow. He acknowledged her with a nod, though his expression remained neutral, betraying neither approval nor disdain. The following day, Mia found herself at the public library after school, researching karate history for a social studies project. She browsed through the sports section, pulling out books on martial arts from different eras. As she flipped through a book on American martial arts pioneers, a name caught her eye: Thelma Gardner. Curious, she read the brief paragraph. Among the few American women to train in Japan during the early 1970s, Thelma Gardner, pictured below with the Tanaka School champions, earned the respect of traditionalists through her dedication and natural talent. Her competitive career was cut short after the controversial Tokyo Open of 1974, where the paragraph ended there, continuing on the next page, which had been torn out. The referenced photo was missing as well. Mia stared at the text, her mind racing. Could this be the same Thelma? The elderly woman fumbling through basic stances at Golden Dragon? She checked out the book and spent the evening searching online for more information, but found little beyond a few mentions in archived martial arts forums, references to Thunderhand Gardner, and the Tokyo scandal. That evening, in her modest apartment, Thelma stood before her bathroom mirror, her nightgown partially lifted to reveal a long, jagged scar that ran across her abdomen. The tissue was puckered and pale against her dark skin, a permanent reminder of violence endured long ago. She traced the scar with her fingertips, her expression solemn. Then she closed her eyes and performed a breathing exercise, slow, deliberate inhales and exhales that gradually deepened, her body relaxing with each breath. Across town, an elderly Japanese man in an impeccably tailored gray suit sat in a rental car, parked with a clear view of Golden Dragon Karate Academy. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture perfect even in the confines of the vehicle. On the passenger seat lay a file folder containing newspaper clippings, photographs, and what appeared to be official documents. all featuring Thelma Gardner in her younger years. The man checked his watch, then started the car and drove away, his face impassive but his eyes alert, missing nothing. The next day's class at Golden Dragon was more crowded than usual. A promotional event had brought in several potential new students, and Rick was in full performance mode, demonstrating flashy kicks and breaks for the audience. Thelma arrived in her now familiar too large GI, taking her place at the back of the class. She noticed immediately that something had changed in the dynamics of the dojo. Students who had previously ignored her now whispered as she passed. Josh and Tyler were huddled together, occasionally glancing her way and snickering. Rick seemed distracted during the warm-up, his instructions less precise than usual. Several times he had to correct himself after giving contradictory commands. Front stance, no, horse stance, focus people. As the class moved through basic drills, Thelma noticed a disturbing pattern. Several students, particularly those in Tyler and Josh's circle, were subtly mimicking her movements, exaggerating her stiffness, her occasional balance issues, her careful pace. Rick grew increasingly frustrated as he lost control of the class. "This is a karate dojo, not a comedy club," he snapped after catching two younger students imitating Thelma's bow. During a water break, Mia approached Thelma. "Don't mind them," she said quietly. "They're just immature." Josh, overhearing, stepped closer. "What was that, Mia? Taking Grandma's side now?" Mia straightened her spine. "Her name is Ms. Gardner, and yes, I am. You guys need to back off." Tyler joined them, towering over Mia. "You might want to remember who your friends are. And you might want to remember basic respect," Mia countered, her voice stronger than she felt. Josh leaned in, his voice low. "Keep interfering, and I'll remind you of your place. Got it?" Mia stepped back, her confidence faltering under his glare. Thelma watched the exchange silently, her eyes missing nothing. After class, Rick was approached by Erica, who had been observing, from her office window. "We need to talk," she said, her tone clipped. "The new reviews are coming in." Rick followed her into the office where she showed him a tablet displaying recent online ratings for the dojo. "Trendy but directionless," she read aloud. "Instructors allow bullying, more focused on image than discipline. This is not what we want associated with our brand, Rick." Rick ran a hand through his hair. "It's been a tough month. We lost 3 advanced students to that new MMA gym across town, and the tournament results weren't great. And now we have disruptions in class," Erica added pointedly. "Your newest student is becoming a liability." "You're the one who pushed for inclusivity," Rick reminded her. "Inclusivity is good for the brand. Disruption is not." Erica closed the tablet cover with a snap. "Fix it." Later that afternoon, a few beginner students stayed for additional practice. Thelma was among them, working on a basic kata in the corner of the dojo. A young boy of about 12 was struggling with a sequence nearby, his frustration evident in his increasingly sloppy movements. After watching for a moment, Thelma approached him. "May I offer a suggestion?" The boy looked at her uncertainly but nodded. "Your weight is shifting too early," she explained, demonstrating the correct foot placement. "Feel your connection to the ground first, then move." The boy tried again, following her guidance. His execution was immediately cleaner, more stable. "That's it," Thelma encouraged. "Much better." Rick, who had been observing from across the room, walked over. "That's a pretty precise correction for someone who just started karate," he said, his tone questioning. Thelma smiled mildly. "Old habits die hard, I suppose." "What does that mean exactly?" Rick pressed. Thelma's expression revealed nothing. "Simply that good posture and balance are universal principles. I may be new to karate, but I've lived in this body for 72 years. You learn a thing or two." Rick seemed unsatisfied with her answer, but was called away to assist another student. Thelma returned to her kata practice, her movements deliberately, unrefined, but her eyes sharp and aware. That evening, as darkness fell over the city, Thelma sat alone in her living room, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. The telephone rang, breaking the silence. She answered it on the third ring. Moshi moshi, she said, the Japanese greeting flowing naturally from her lips. The voice that responded was male, elderly, speaking in rapid Japanese. Thelma listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. Hi, she replied finally. Wakata. Yes. I understand. She hung up, sat motionless for several long moments, then rose and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights cast pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalk. In the distance, a car engine started, then faded away. They're watching, the voice had said. Are you ready to stop pretending? Thelma stared into the darkness, her reflection in the window glass revealing the face of a woman who had carried secrets for decades, and who now stood at the crossroads of revelation. The past, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. The morning light filtered through the windows of Golden Dragon as students filed in for the Monday class. Thelma arrived early, her movements more confident as she changed into her GI and tied her white belt. The past week had established a routine, though hardly a comfortable one. Rick was demonstrating a new sparring drill, having students form a circle while two participants practiced in the center. Remember, control is key, he emphasized. This isn't about hurting your partner, it's about technique. When Thelma's turn came, she stepped into the circle opposite a younger woman named Sarah. As they bowed to each other, Josh extended his foot just enough to catch Thelma's heel. She stumbled, forward, nearly falling flat before catching herself. Sorry, Josh said with exaggerated innocence. Total accident. Tyler snickered from across the circle, exchanging a fist bump with Josh when Rick wasn't looking. Thelma straightened herself, brushed off her GI, and looked directly at Josh. Instead of anger or embarrassment, she simply chuckled, a warm, knowing sound that somehow made Josh shift uncomfortably. No harm done, she said, turning back to her sparring partner. The session continued without further incident, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Josh's prank hadn't produced the humiliation he'd expected, and Thelma's reaction left him unsettled, rather than satisfied. After class, as students gathered their belongings, Mia approached Josh by the water fountain. That was a real jerk move, she said loudly enough for nearby students to hear. Josh turned, water dripping from his chin. What's your problem? My problem is watching you act like a bully to someone who's done nothing to you. Mia crossed her arms. She deserves the same respect as anyone else here. Tyler joined them, towering over Mia. Since when are you the dojo police? Since when is basic human decency optional? Mia shot back. A small crowd had formed, watching the confrontation with interest. Rick noticed the gathering from across the room but made no move to intervene, instead busying himself with straightening equipment. Josh leaned closer to Mia. You know what? You're right. Next time, I'll make sure to trip her harder. Maybe she'll finally get the message that she doesn't belong here. That's enough. The voice came from behind them. Thelma, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. Mia, thank you for your concern, but I can handle myself. She turned to Josh and Tyler. Young men, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in your training. Clearly, it's not peace of mind. With that, she walked away, leaving Josh red-faced and Tyler unusually quiet. That night, the city park was empty, save for a few late joggers and a homeless man dozing on a distant bench. The moon cast silver light across the open grass where a solitary figure moved in the shadows of an ancient oak tree. Thelma, dressed in loose black pants and a fitted tank top, flowed through movements that bore no resemblance to the awkward fumbling she displayed at Golden Dragon. Her kata was precise, elegant, a perfect synthesis of power and grace. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she executed complex turns, her arms cutting through the air with controlled force. In these movements, decades fell away. There was no tremor in her hands, no stiffness in her joints. Each technique flowed seamlessly into the next, her breathing deep and measured, her focus absolute. Hidden behind a cluster of rhododendrons, Mia watched in astonishment. She had come to the park to run off her frustration after the confrontation with Josh, never expecting to encounter her elderly classmate, especially not like this. She remained motionless, afraid that any movement would break the spell of the moment. As Thelma completed her kata, she paused, centering herself with a deep breath. Then, to Mia's horror, she turned and looked directly at the bushes where Mia was hiding. "You can come out now," Thelma called softly. "The mosquitoes will eat you, alive in there." Mia emerged sheepishly, brushing leaves from her running shorts. "I'm sorry. I wasn't spying, I just—" "Yes, you were," Thelma said, but there was no anger in her voice. "And that's all right. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses." "That was—" Mia struggled for words. "That wasn't what you show in class." "No," Thelma agreed. "It wasn't." "Why?" Mia asked. "Why pretend you can barely do a front stance when you can move like that?" Thelma sat on a nearby bench, gesturing for Mia to join her. "Some questions are better left unanswered, at least for now." "I found something," Mia said after a moment of silence. "At the library. A book about martial arts history. It mentioned someone named Thelma Gardner who trained in Japan in the 70s. That's you, isn't it?" Thelma's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or caution. "The past is complicated, Mia. Sometimes it's best to let it die." "But it's late," Thelma interrupted gently. "You should get home. Your parents will worry." As if to emphasize her point, she rose and collected her small bag from beneath the tree. "Whatever you think you saw tonight, I'd appreciate if you kept it to yourself." Mia nodded slowly, knowing she'd witnessed something extraordinary but unsure what to make of it. As Thelma walked away, her posture once again adopted the slight stoop she maintained at the dojo, a mask slipping back into place. The images from the park haunted Mia's dreams that night, intermingling with fragments from an old memory. My documentary she'd watched years ago about martial arts legends. In her dream, a younger Thelma stood victorious in a tournament ring, her hand raised by a referee, while a defeated opponent bowed in respect. Tokyo, 1972. The underground circuit was thriving. Unregistered matches held in warehouses and basements, away from the sanctioned tournaments with their rules and limitations. These were the fights that built reputations, where legends were born and broken. Thelma Gardner, 20 years old and fearless, faced her opponent across the chalk circle. He was Japanese, at least 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, with a reputation for breaking bones. The crowd, mostly men, mostly betting against her, watched with anticipation as she assumed her stance. "The American girl will fall in 30 seconds, someone called in Japanese. "The American girl understands you," Thelma replied in perfect Japanese, her eyes never leaving her opponent. When the signal came, the man attacked with devastating speed. Thelma didn't retreat. She stepped into his assault, redirecting his energy and finding the spaces between his techniques. Her counterstrike was precise, a single palm heel to the sternum that sent him staggering backward. The crowd fell silent as the match continued, their shock growing as this foreign woman systematically dismantled their champion. Her final technique was a sweep followed by a perfectly placed strike that stopped just short of her opponent's throat. "Thunderhand!" someone shouted, and the nickname spread through the crowd like wildfire. The memory dream faded as Mia's alarm blared, pulling her back to the present. At Golden Dragon later that day, the usual dynamics were in play. Tyler was showing off for a group of younger students, demonstrating flashy kicks that looked impressive, but lacked proper foundation. Josh was in the corner, his face unusually serious as he worked through a kata with mechanical precision. Erica emerged from her office just as Rick was preparing to start class. "Rick, a word?" she called, beckoning him over. Their conversation was hushed but intense. Mia, filling her water bottle nearby, caught fragments. "Found in his locker? A tournament rules. Handle it quietly." When they separated, Erica's face was flushed with anger, while Rick looked troubled. Tyler was called into the office moments later, emerging pale and shaken. Class proceeded normally, with Thelma once again playing her role as the struggling elderly student. Mia watched her with new eyes, noticing the subtle control behind each mistake, the precision with which Thelma maintained her charade. After class, Josh approached Thelma as she was gathering her things. "I wanted to apologize," he said stiffly, "for yesterday, the trip. It was stupid." Thelma regarded him thoughtfully. "Apology accepted. But I'm curious, why the change of heart?" Josh glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "My dad saw you yesterday. Your father? Alan Wilson. He used to fight MMA before it was mainstream. He never made it big, but he knows his stuff." Josh's words came out in a rush. "He was picking me up and saw you walking to your car. He said you move, like someone who's trained for decades, that your posture and awareness aren't things that can be faked." Thelma's expression remained neutral. "Your father sounds observant. He's also a complete jerk who thinks I'll never amount to anything," Josh added bitterly. "Last night he spent an hour telling me how pathetic my form is compared to some old lady at my dojo." Understanding dawned in Thelma's eyes. "Ah, so your apology is—" "Not because of what he said," Josh insisted quickly. "It's because, I don't know, maybe I don't want to be like him." Before Thelma could respond, the front door opened and an elderly Japanese man in an immaculate suit entered the dojo. The receptionist looked up, startled by his formal appearance. "I help you?" she asked. "I am here to observe," the man replied, his English precise but heavily accented. Rick emerged from the back, his eyebrows rising at the sight of the visitor. "Are you with the local newspaper? We've been expecting someone to cover our upcoming tournament." The man bowed slightly. "I am Kenji Tanaka. I am here for personal interest." At the sound of his name, Thelma froze. She was partially hidden behind a display case of trophies, but her eyes locked with Kenji's across the room. A moment of silent recognition passed between them. Rick, oblivious to the exchange, guided Kenji to a seat along the wall. "Well, you're welcome to watch. We have an advanced class starting in 15 minutes. Thelma slipped out the side door, but Kenji followed shortly after, catching up to her in the parking lot. "Thelma-san," he said softly. She turned, her posture straightening subtly. "Kenji-san, it's been a long time." 41 years, 7 months, he confirmed. "Since Tokyo?" A shadow crossed Thelma's face. "Why are you here?" "People will learn who you are," Kenji said, his voice low and urgent. "Are you ready for the consequences?" Thelma looked back at the dojo, then to the horizon beyond. "I'm done running from ghosts, Kenji. They find you anyway." Inside the dojo, Mia was preparing for the advanced class when she spotted Thelma and the Japanese visitor talking in the parking lot. Their body language suggested an old acquaintance, formal but familiar. After class, Mia approached Thelma. As she was leaving, "Ms. Gardner," she called, "I need to talk to you." Thelma paused, her expression guarded. "Yes, Mia?" Mia pulled the library book from her backpack, opening it to the page about American martial artists in Japan. "This is you, isn't it?" The paragraph mentions the Tokyo Open of 1974, but the next page was torn out. "What happened there? And who's the man you were talking to earlier?" Thelma gently closed the book. "Some doors are better left shut, Mia. But why are you pretending? You're clearly a master, not a beginner. I saw you in the park. You move like water." Thelma's eyes softened. "Let the past die," she said, but her tone was kind rather than dismissive. "Focus on your own journey." As Mia watched Thelma walk away, she felt a presence behind her. It was Josh, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. "What was that about?" he asked. Mia hesitated, then decided to trust her instinct. "I think there's more to Ms. Gardner than she's letting on." Josh nodded slowly. "My dad said something similar. He mentioned an old martial arts documentary he watched years ago. Something about American pioneers in Japan. He said her movement patterns are identical to footage he saw." They stood in silence. For a moment, two unlikely allies united by a growing mystery. Across town, in the administrative office of Golden Dragon, Erica sat alone reviewing security camera footage. On her screen, Tyler could be seen opening his locker, removing a small bottle of pills and quickly pocketing them before looking around nervously. Erica paused the footage, then deleted the file. She picked up her phone and dialed. "We need to talk about the tournament," she said when the call connected. "We have a situation that could damage the brand." The next morning, a notice appeared on the dojo bulletin board. "Attention all students, Challenge Day. This Friday, 6 p.m. Showcase your skills against fellow students and instructors. Friends and family welcome special demonstration matches to be." Announced at the bottom in Erica's neat handwriting, a note had been added. Featuring confidence-building exercise, Sensei Rick versus Ms. Gardner. When Tyler saw it, he laughed out loud. "Oh man, this is going to be epic. The old lady's going to get demolished." Nearby, Thelma read the announcement with a calm expression. When Tyler's comment reached her ears, she simply turned and smiled. "I accept," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Friday evening arrived with an air of anticipation. Golden Dragon had been transformed for Challenge Day. Extra seating lined the walls, a judge's table had been set up at the front, and a large mat covered the center of the training floor. Strings of paper lanterns cast a warm glow over the space, adding a theatrical touch to the proceedings. By 6 o'clock, the dojo was packed. Parents, siblings, and friends of students filled every available seat. To Erica's delight, a reporter from the local newspaper had arrived, camera in hand, ready to document the event for the community section. Rick moved through the crowd in his formal black GI, a red headband tied around his forehead, his signature look for demonstrations. His smile was confident, his handshake firm as he greeted parents and potential new students. "This is excellent publicity," Erica whispered as she passed him, tablet in hand. "I've already received 3 new membership inquiries, in the women's locker room." Thelma changed into her GI with methodical precision. She could hear the excited chatter from the main floor, the occasional burst of laughter or applause as preliminary matches took place. Mia entered, already dressed for her own match. "Ms. Gardner? Are you okay?" Thelma looked up with a serene smile. "Perfectly fine, dear. Just preparing myself. You know this is Erica's way of humiliating you, right? Rick is a 5th-degree black belt. He was state champion 3 years running. Was he now?" Thelma's tone was mild, almost amused. "How interesting." Mia hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You don't have to do this. You could say you're not feeling well, or I never run from a challenge, Mia." Thelma tied her white belt with practiced ease, especially one so graciously offered. The preliminary matches proceeded smoothly, students paired by rank and age, demonstrating their skills in light contact sparring and kata performances. Josh won his match against a boy from the intermediate class, his techniques solid, if uninspired. Tyler, to everyone's surprise, was eliminated early, after an overly aggressive attack left him vulnerable to a counter. Kenji Tanaka sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. Occasionally his eyes would meet Thelma's across the room, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Rick stepped to the center of the mat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special demonstration match tonight. As part of our commitment to inclusivity, we like to show that karate is for everyone, regardless of age or background." A murmur ran through the crowd as Thelma made her way to the mat, her white belt a stark contrast to Rick's black. "Ms. Gardner joined us recently and has shown great enthusiasm," Rick continued. "Tonight she'll demonstrate a kata from our intermediate curriculum, followed by a light sparring session with me." The crowd applauded politely, though several exchanged confused glances. Parents leaned toward each other, whispering behind their hands. "First, the kata," Rick announced. "This is Heian Sanden, typically taught to students at the brown belt level. I'll demonstrate first, then Ms. Gardner will attempt a simplified version." Rick moved to the center of the mat and performed the kata with precision and power, his movements sharp and dynamic. The crowd applauded appreciatively. Then it was Thelma's turn. She took her place at the center, assumed the starting position, and began. Her first few movements were hesitant, almost clumsy, exactly what everyone expected. A few snickers came from Tyler's corner of the room. Erica's smile was satisfied, her phone raised to capture the moment. Then, something shifted. Midway through the kata, Thelma's posture straightened. Her movements became more fluid, more precise. Each technique flowed seamlessly into the next, her breathing deep and controlled, her focus absolute. The snickers died away. The dojo fell silent except for the whisper of Thelma's GI as she moved through the air with unexpected grace. By the final sequence, she was performing at a level that clearly surpassed Rick's demonstration. Her final stance was rock solid, her ki sharp and powerful, echoing through the stunned silence of the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then, hesitantly, applause began. Scattered at first, then growing as the audience processed what they had witnessed. Rick stood frozen, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Erica's phone had lowered, her mouth slightly open. In the front row, Kenji nodded almost imperceptibly, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Rick cleared his throat. Well, that was unexpected. Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Let's move on to the sparring demonstration. They faced each other on the mat, bowed, and assumed fighting stances. Rick's was textbook perfect, aggressive and forward-leaning. Thelma's was subtle, deceptively simple, her weight distributed evenly. Remember, this is light contact only, Rick said loud enough for the audience to hear. I'll adjust my level to make this a learning experience. Thelma simply nodded. At the signal to begin, Rick moved forward with a testing jab, clearly holding back. Thelma didn't move, didn't need to. The punch fell short by precisely 1 inch. Rick frowned and tried again, this time with a combination. Jab, cross, front kick. Thelma swayed slightly, each technique missing by the narrowest margin without her appearing to dodge. The audience leaned forward in their seats. This wasn't what they had expected. Rick's next attack was faster, less controlled. A roundhouse, kick followed by a reverse punch. Thelma finally moved, not backward, but forward, inside Rick's guard. She didn't strike. She simply occupied the space he needed, making his techniques collapse in on themselves. Frustration flashed across Rick's face. He launched a more aggressive combination, abandoning the pretense of a teaching exercise. Thelma remained calm, her defense impenetrable. She moved like mist around his techniques, always just beyond reach, never retreating. The match continued. For 2 full minutes, Rick growing increasingly disoriented by his inability to land a single technique. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breathing became labored, while Thelma remained composed, almost serene. Finally, Rick overextended on a lunging punch. In that moment of imbalance, Thelma moved. Her hand flashed out, a palm strike so soft it was barely visible, touching his wrist with surgical precision. Rick's hand opened involuntarily. His stance crumbled and he stumbled forward, catching himself just before falling. The dojo went completely silent. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then Tyler's voice broke the spell. "That's bullshit," he shouted, standing up. "She got lucky."